Welcome to the Racket House.
What up?
To the Racket House Podcast. I am John Gilman, aka Racket Club, aka founder of the Racket House, and this is episode 10, featuring my man Nick Sommers, aka Kaysin. So just as a reminder, this is where we discuss all things music and success in our fun corner of the world, helping to inspire, inform, educate, motivate, and keep hope alive for musicians, creatives, entrepreneurs, anyone else who wants to grow their brand in the music or creative spaces. And today I'm really honored to have Nick Sommers, like I said, Kaysin, to the podcast. Somebody that I've been following for a long time since my days in LA, and just musically as a DJ, somebody who's got a lot of influence and a really cool job, just subjectively, in my opinion, in the music space. And we'll get into all that stuff. But wanted to just, introduce the world to him. For those who don't know, he's a Los Angeles-based DJ and producer. He's released on labels like Repopulate Mars, Thrive, The Myth of Nick, Sink or Swim, among others. He's released collaborations with John Summit, The Juggernaut, Dylan Nathaniel, Wednesday, Tough Love, and remixes for artists like Mind Chatter. He's A&R for Repopulate Mars, South of Saturn, and North of Neptune. And for those who don't know, these are pretty substantial labels in the dance and electronic world. And then, his music's been supported by Fisher, Tiesto, Vintage Culture, and Side Piece. He's toured across all the states, done headline tours in Canada, Mexico. He's played in Ibiza, played in Amsterdam. He's played it at EDC, Vegas, and Day Trip, some of the biggest festivals in dance music. So please welcome to the podcast, episode 10. We have Nick Sommers, a.k.a. Kaysin. And at some point I will get the cheer.
I was gonna say you could have some crowd noise in there, just like a kind of
I'll get one of these days. I'll remember to do that ahead of time. So
right.
Well, thanks for joining. We've been talking about this for a little while. We both have hectic schedules. I know you're super, super busy in this present moment, getting ready for a big show in LA tomorrow. Kaysin and Friends at one of the most prominent venues in LA, in Southern California, maybe even in the country, Sound Nightclub, one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great. I'm super excited about it. I mean, Sound was one of the first real clubs to give me an opportunity to play in 2017, so a long time ago. And I've been playing there for many, many years. So to do like a big headline show, directly with Sound and with some other awesome promoters, I mean, it's an awesome opportunity. And, someone who's born and raised out here, it means a lot. So I'm super excited for it. Nervous. There's a lot to do, but very excited.
Yeah, I think there's something, I don't know what the exact saying is, but like when you're nervous, it means you care, right? And obviously your name's on this thing, so you care, right? But before we even started recording this, we were just kind of like catching up a little bit. And you were talking about, the pressure of, going from support artist to headline artist, right? Headline act. And you've been headlining a lot of shows recently, which is amazing and super awesome for you, right? Your music's doing a lot of the speaking for you. You have some strategic collaborations, but you've just been like, you got a lot of buzz around, you got hype, right? And that's what people want. That's what people pay, buy tickets for. So I'm really curious, to just dive right into it and talk about like over your time in doing this, which is, you can also give us a brief history lesson here, like how long you've been making music, DJing, all that stuff. And then the transition, like when the transition started to happen, between, direct support, supporting artists to now headlining and getting flown across the country, around the world, and all that stuff. So a lot of questions there, but just, tell us about those transitions and like what the main differences are.
Yeah. So I've been making music my whole life, more or less. I actually started playing violin and guitar when I was really, really young. I want to say maybe 12 or 13. I was also in a band when I was like 14, an edgy band, Deception Within, we called it. Don't know who was deceiving us at the age of 14, but that was the name of our band.
If I can empathize with that name, mine was called A Crowded Mind, and we were also
that's a great name, by the way.
Right?
Great name.
Angsty teen rock band, barely hitting puberty, and just like thrashing metal. Anyways, back to you.
Yeah. So, and then I got into electronic music, kind of started doing, DJing, kind of producing a little bit when I was like 17 or so. And then in college, I went to UCSB, and in college, I actually started really, DJing like parties and then really getting into production. And then from there, I just kind of, went with it. And, it's like kind of what we were touching on earlier. When you first start DJing, you're very nervous because, performing in front of a crowd in any capacity, whether you're a DJ, singer, you're in a band, you're a speaker, anything, it's nerve wracking. No matter who you are, it's a nerve wracking thing. So especially in the beginning, those things were very anxiety inducing and very, nerve wracking. And then as you get more comfortable, you start to familiarize yourself with like everything that's going on, and you feel like, okay, more confident. But then it's kind of like, music, your music trajectory in general, it's like kind of goes like this. So like you're really nervous here, then you get confident again. Then you start playing bigger clubs. So you're nervous again. You build up the confidence, and then you start playing those bigger clubs, but you're now headlining. So you're back to being kind of nervous. Right. So it's like the different stages, and it's part of the process. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, I mean, just like kind of what we touched on before we started recording, right now I'm in the stage where I'm pretty much only doing headline gigs, which is awesome. That's obviously what you want to be doing, but there's definitely a different level of expectation from you as an artist, because it's not like, your support for a big act. And it's like, yeah, you got to push tickets, but like, it's probably going to do okay. And if it doesn't, it's not super on you. But then when you're headlining, it's like, it's kind of all on you. So it kind of adds another level to it, which is definitely something that can be, can be taxing and stuff. I mean, anybody who's listening to this and you're like a musician of any kind, you all know how nerve wracking it is having your management or agent tell you the ticket count every day up to the show day. And it's, it can suck sometimes, but you gotta give it your all, push as much as you can and be your authentic self when you perform. And, the fans are going to resonate with that and people will come out.
Yeah. So a few things there. And like I said, congrats on all the success and everything, and, getting your name on your own headlining show at a major in LA and in the country, frankly. So, I've thrown events. I've been a supporting DJ, never quite, the headlining spot that you are. Is there really that pressure still to sell tickets? Because, I'd love to hear kind of what the expectation is these days. I think there's probably an assumption that like you're booked to play and the promoter does the rest, the venue does the rest. But is it really on your shoulders to drive the success of these shows?
You know what? It depends on a case-to-case basis. Some venues and promoters, they're more locked in, so they're true promoters. They handle the promotion and they do a great job, and they don't put a lot of pressure on the artist because they know that they booked that artist because they know they can sell the artist. So there's a lot of people out there who do an amazing job in the industry. I think John just disappeared.
All right, I think we're back on episode 10A of the Racket House 10A, podcast.
Baby.
I don't know, man. Technical difficulties. Hopefully not again, but thanks for bearing with that. So the question was just about the actual reality of a pressure on a headlining act to sell tickets, really. Like, because like I said, from where I've sat in my corner of the world, it was always just like it's on the promoter, it's on the venue, it's on, the support acts to help push things. But how much of that really does fall to you as the headliner?
Yeah, so I would say it really kind of it changes on a case-to-case basis. There's a lot of factors, the market, the promoter, the venue. Some promoters do an incredible job at promoting the show, so that they're going to push it. You don't have to rely. They're like, you're still going to push it as an artist, but that they're going to do a great job with it. And, they're really going to kind of take the lead on that. And then, some of these companies like Space Yacht, for example, they have such an amazing built-in crowd, and they have such a cool fan base and, people who always come to their shows. So, they're going to push it really well. But there are promoters and venues that don't do it quite as much. So in those cases, there is more pressure on you as an artist, especially as a headlining artist, to really promote the show, push the show, be constantly posting about it. And it kind of changes, case to case, which I think is part of the reason it's a little bit frustrating sometimes, because it's like you don't always know how things are going to go, especially when you're playing a new market you haven't played before.
Sure.
So, when you've played, like, for example, LA, I've played a million times. Vegas, I've played a million times. San Diego. So I know I have a huge fan base out there. But then I'm playing in Philadelphia next Saturday for the first time, or excuse me, next Friday. And I've never played out there. So it's like an untouched market for me. So that kind of also adds a little bit of a layer too, because it's like, you were booked there for a reason because they believe that, you're going to be able to pull people there. But when it's uncharted territory and you haven't worked with a promoter before, you kind of rolling the dice a little bit. But I will say, I mean, I would say I've been lucky to run into mostly promoters and venues who have done an excellent job of promoting the show and making sure they're communicating everything, like what they need and what they're doing and what we could be doing. So I would say that I run into people and work with people more often than I do with people who aren't quite as good. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, the pressure is definitely there for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I do see you heavily pushing the show, of course. I mean, again, I think it's like when it's Kaysin and Friends, when it's your name and friends, and you're kind of throwing the show too, right? Like you're not just being booked,
Yep.
right? Is that fair to say? Yeah. So no, I totally get that. And I actually, I do remember from some of the shows I threw with, booking headlining talent where things weren't quite where we wanted them to be. And then we see that, we're talking to the headliners management and we're like, hey, like, we're not really seeing much out of them. Can they post? Can they throw a story up? Something like that. So it does kind of make sense. It is, everybody's trying to sell. Everybody needs to sell tickets these days. This is kind of what it needs to be, right? And and then do you maybe don't have to talk about the details, but like, are you on the hook with the venue too at all, or is that they've actually booked you? Is how does that all look?
What do you mean by on the hook?
So like, I guess, did they book you to play there, or is this your party that you went to the venue and said, hey, I want to do an event here?
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So no, that makes sense. So this one, my friends own this promo company, House of Dreams. They do a great job, throw awesome events in LA. They were doing some kind of warehouse kind of shows for a while, and now they have like a monthly or every 2-month thing they do at Sound. And we had just been talking about doing a show, and they came to me and said, hey, let's we should do like a headline show for you, Kaysin and Friends. And then they pitched it to Sound, and Sound was on board for it. So that's kind of how that one worked. And as I said, I played for Sound at Sound a million times. I can't even keep count. But this is the first time I'm doing a headline where it's like with a promoter, but also directly with Sound.
Yep.
So it's like, a little bit more on the line. I did another Kaysin and Friends in June 2023 with Space Yacht. So kind of what we talked about earlier, that was a big deal, and it was awesome and went great, but it was also Space Yacht. So there was a little bit less pressure involved with it, I would say, because Space Yacht, I mean, shout out to Henry, Rami, and all them. They crush it no matter what.
Yep.
Actually was at their show last night in LA, and it was awesome.
Yep.
So yeah, it kind of depends case to case, I would say.
Yeah. Kaysin to Kaysin.
Kaysin to Kaysin. Yeah.
And then when it's an and friend show, are the other artists on the lineup? Did you handpick them? Do you work with a promoter? Like how do you figure out who's on the lineup?
Yeah. So for my Kaysin and Friends shows, so I've done a number of them. I've done this is the third one in LA. I did one in downtown LA at this venue called the Catwalk, which is a really, really cool venue down there. And then I've done Vegas at Area 15, and my God. And then I did Miami. I did Miami Music Week last year. So for Kaysin and Friends, I always book the entire lineup front to back. The whole concept behind it is I've been, obviously we're going to touch on this, but I've been working on the other side of the industry for 8 years now, A&Ring and running, labels. So I built up an insane network of friends, associates, people we've released with, people I've DJ'd with. So this is kind of like me tapping into all the people I'm connected with and having the opportunity to put them on a show with me and, book, my friends. That's the whole concept is I always book the full lineup, and I only book people that I know personally and they're my actual friend in real life. And then we always do at the very end, like back-to-back kind of a family set with surprise guests. So tomorrow night, can't say who it is, but we got some pretty massive artists who are going to be playing at the end with me, which is kind of cool because it adds a little bit of a mystique behind it. People don't really know who's going to pull up at the end. So, yeah, it's a great concept. I mean, I love it. I love being in a position to put my friends on lineups, whether it's somebody bigger like Adapter, but then also to be able to book like small artists to open too that I'm friends with, because I'm friends with artists of every single level in the industry. So it brings me a lot of joy being able to like put them on a show and have them play with me.
Right. And we didn't talk about this, but are you picking me up from the airport to be that surprise set, or like do I have to Uber there? Like what was the deal?
So we're actually sending a limo. I know you said you wanted a hot pink
Yeah,
stretch
hot pink.
Hummer limo.
Yep.
So we're gonna send that. I'm trying to find the alcohol that you requested. I don't know.
Four
It's like
Loco, they
$1,000.
still make Four Loco, I think.
They
Yeah.
still do. You wanted the
Okay.
original one.
The
It's
original.
$1,000 on eBay, but
Yep.
I'm winning the bidding war right now.
Perfect. Okay. So just as long as Paris Hilton's in that hot pink limo, we're good to go.
She'll be there. Don't worry.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And then like before our technical difficulties, you were talking about like the different types of pressures and shows. And it's funny to hear, you know, it's that whole thing about like, we don't know what goes on in somebody's head, right? We only have the outside view. But like when I've seen you DJ, you have an insane amount of confidence, almost a little bit too much confidence up there. Like there's this swagger, man. You're like, you're going left to right, stomping your feet, you know, doing that thing. And for good reason, dude. Like you crush it. And I'm not just saying that as somebody who asked you to be on my podcast. I'm saying that as a fan of your music and your DJ sets.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I like you, I only have people on who I'm friends of and, I want to, talk more with, but yeah. So the, over the years of like the varying types of pressure that you've had to deal with from being an opening support act or college party DJ or whatever to now headlining, are there any tactics or methods that you use? Or is it just you're facing the music and you're just throwing your weight into it? Like any tips, secrets there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about performing in general is you got to set yourself up for success as best as you can. So I like to make sure that I go into the set and I'm prepared as I possibly can be. So I have my playlists ironed out and sorted in absolutely insane ways. Like the way I have it all sorted out, all my music I know is queued up right. It's got the keys on it correctly. The waveforms are correct. I know a lot of artists kind of just load their stuff up and play. There's nothing wrong with that. But my whole thing is this. When you're playing and performing, you want to focus on reading the crowd and playing the best music that you can for the crowd, putting on a good show and giving everybody a great experience. You don't want to be focusing on, oh, I didn't put the key on this. I don't know what key it is. Oh, the waveform is off. So you got to set yourself up to be able to give 100% to the performance. So like I always like to make sure that my playlists are all ironed out. If I haven't played the venue before, I like to do my research. So if it's a new venue or a new promoter, I'll see who's played in the past. And as I said earlier, I know a lot of the DJs who play all these venues. So if I see one of my friends had just played, I'll hit them up and say, how was it? What worked, what didn't work, what was kind of, because every venue and crowd is different. I mean, how you play to a club in a college town is totally different than how you play somewhere that's a little bit more like bougie and they're a little bit older. You got to kind of like be able to like change up your set according to the differences in the crowd. So yeah, just doing your research in advance and making sure you kind of like understand, the crowd and the sound. And obviously if it's a new venue you've never played, there's only so much you can do. But again, just, preparing and setting yourself up to do as best as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even the microscopic differences, I think, between like a Thursday night and a Friday night or a Saturday night, right? Like, being at a venue like Sound on a Thursday where people are generally showing up for that show versus I think like Friday, Saturdays, people just buy tickets to go to Sound because it's a club to go to on a weekend, right? And so there may even be more, well, I don't know if there's more or less pressure on a Thursday where people are buying tickets specifically to see you, but I mean, you have people coming in to see you play and then you're trying to win new fans as well, right? So
yeah, I would say that's actually an interesting point. I would say playing on like a Thursday, it gives you some advantages. The advantages are you don't have as much competition, especially in a city like LA where there's a trillion clubs and there's a million good DJs playing all over the place. Like you can pick a night like, oh, well, let's pick a night where there's not a lot of competition. It doesn't exist. There's competition every night.
Yep.
So a Thursday or like a Tuesday, what Space Yacht does, you definitely have that advantage, but you have the disadvantage of a lot of people got work the next day. They got work the next day. And sometimes it's hard to get them to come out during a weekday, which is totally understandable. Like I have friends who work corporate jobs. My girlfriend works a corporate job. She's got to be in the office at like 8 a.m. So it's like, it's understandable for those people to not, be able to go out and go crazy when they have to be in an office the next day. So there's kind of a give and take. I would say definitely on a weekday, the people who are coming, you know that they're more coming because they want to see you and they're willing to, dedicate the night to you regardless of what it means for them the next day. Definitely on the weekends, you do have people who are just going to the club because they want to go to the club. I know people who will go to clubs, like some of my friends from high school, they'll go to clubs and they don't even know who's playing. They'll just go and buy a ticket.
Yeah.
And like that sounds kind of uncommon to us, but that's like very common for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, that kind of proves what I was trying to say about like the weekend crowd at a club. I remember way back in the day. I mean, I grew up in Boston, which is like, one of the tiniest markets for dance and electronic, but it was growing over the years, and I was there like, as dance was getting bigger in America overall. But I remember going to this one club, Ocean Club, Quincy, Massachusetts. It was like it was trying to feel like a Miami Beach club kind of thing in Boston. And I remember Claude Von Stroke was playing there. And I just remember going up to somebody. It was like a Friday, Saturday night. I go up to somebody. I was like, "Do you know who the DJ is?" And they're like, "No." Like they're just like no. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, whatever. Enjoy yourself. So I could always tell that. But yeah, also the weekday crowd. And LA's built different though, right? You might get those just degenerates, or you might get those service industry people who have a Monday, Tuesday off, or whatever it is. But
LA is insane when it comes to the days of the week, when it comes to parties. Like, it's insane because you have clubs like Sound who are throwing parties Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Over the summer, you got Day Trip who's throwing a massive party every Sunday. Yep. And then you got people like, Blind Tiger and some of the after hours places who are throwing parties every single night.
Yeah.
So there's always stuff to go to, which is awesome. But at the same time, it can be distracting. And also, that you always have competition no matter what.
Yeah. There's always a good networking opportunity too. If you want to just go shake some hands and show some support, well, that's great. So thank you for walking me through that and the listeners out there. I mean, I would love to get more in tune. I personally know you're kind of like earlier beginning stories, but I think you're in such a unique role. And, this podcast is, while I came up in, dance and I'm a DJ and I produce as well, there are listeners out there who don't know anything about this world, right? Like I work with rappers, I work with, rock musicians, things like that. So, I repopulate Mars in the imprints as A&R, as pretty much the founder's right hand man, I guess. Is that fair to say? Like,
I would say so.
Yeah, I'd say so. So, like, it's a very important role that you take seriously. And how did you find yourself in it? And like, what does it mean to you on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do you think of yourself in this position? And do you understand the type of influence you have? I'm sure you do, but like,
yeah. I mean, so I got into A&R. I was actually playing on Groove Cruise, which is like, I mean, for those people who don't know, it's it's a rave on a boat. They also have EDC. They have a bunch of kind of things. I was playing on Groove Cruise, I want to say 8 years ago. I was the smallest act on the lineup. I think I was playing the smallest room at like 4 a.m. But for me, it was a huge opportunity. It was awesome that I got booked for that. And I randomly just met Lee there, Lee Fawcett, he was headlining. And I just went into the conversation like, I'm a fan of this guy, but like, I'm not trying to get something out of him. I'm not trying to like see what I can get out of this, this meeting. I'm just going to meet the guy and we're going to connect. So we just connected organically. And he had just started Repopulate Mars. It was on like the second release. I didn't even know he had started the label just because I wasn't in tune with it.
Sure.
And we just kind of connected organically. We realized we both lived in LA, somewhat close to each other. And he was just like, hey, I just started this label. Like, would you like to, jump on and help me with some, tasks at the label? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then from there, it just grew into what it is now. And I've been the head of A&R. I'm really the only A&R for 8 years now. Repopulate Mars, South of Saturn, North of Neptune. And it's been an awesome, awesome journey. I mean, I love it so much. It's really, really cool being able to be on the front lines of the trends in dance music, being able to hear these massive records, 6 months to a year before they're going to come out, and being able to see the process of like, oh, this is just a demo, and then seeing the hype build, and then we release it and it's like number one and like everybody's playing it. Being able to see that whole process is awesome. It's really, really cool. And one of the other things that I think is probably my favorite part of being an A&R is as an artist myself, I know how good it feels to get a record signed. I remember when I got my first ever track signed to a label. Shout out to Hood Politics. My first ever track signed to like a label. It was just such an amazing feeling because it just
Yep.
kind of like you work so hard and you get to the point where it's good enough where a label wants to release it. It's just such an awesome feeling. And I still get that feeling every time I sign a track. Still, it's like I get so happy. It's like awesome. So being able to be the person to deliver that news to artists is the number one reason that I do this job. I love it so much. It just brings me so much joy being able to like deliver that news, build the release with them, and see what it does for their career. I mean, we've had artists who, like John Summit, for example. I've been friends with John for almost 10 years now. And when he first started sending us demos, he was a tiny DJ and producer, extremely talented right off the jump. I mean, he's where he is because of a lot of factors, but I would say the primary factor is he's insanely talented. And so it was kind of awesome. Like, we were one of the, not the first, but one of the first bigger labels to support him really early on. And then just being able to see his trajectory from there and, doing what he's doing now. And I just saw the guy play at the Kia Forum like 3 weeks ago. And I was standing in the room like, this is insane now.
Yeah.
So being able to be a part of like, some of these artist stories and journeys is just so awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, man, there's so much here. First of all, the organic connection. I didn't get to call this out in the beginning, but just like the way that you and I first met, I'll never forget this because I think it's like it really speaks to like how genuine you are as a person. Is there was that Asian night market in Santa Monica, and I had only it was like this is my memory. You may not remember this, but
it's coming back to me.
There was it was several years ago. It was like a Santa Monica, it was like probably a Sunday or something. I was like in line to get some dumplings or whatever, and I see you. I'd never met you. I knew who you were, and I go, "Yo, Kaysin." And he's like, "Nick." You go, "Nick." You put your hand out and say, "Hey, Nick, nice to meet you." And like, I think that like personable approach gets you so far. And we talk about this industry being so massive and saturated, but the genuine connections and the actual relationships that you can build are really the things that sustain you, right?
100%.
Yeah. Don't be a dick, be a nice, genuine person and give more than you can take. Now back to the A&R stuff. I mean, so how much of a, besides rejecting people like me when they send demos, right? So like when you have the good, you give the good news, right? Makes you feel good. But like on the other side of that, you've been doing it for so long now, but like when you have to send a rejection email, do you have a process behind that? Have you learned to get good at it? Have you learned to take the emotion out of it? It never feels good telling somebody no, right?
Yeah.
What's that part of it like?
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult, especially because we get so many demos. So like the way I kind of run my process is we have a demo box. That's the generic demo box that artists that are smaller or they could be bigger, but they don't have a connection to like Lee or I or the label. They submit there. So with those kind of demos, because there's so many, I don't really have the opportunity to give feedback and get specific with every single one that we deny. I wish I could. In a perfect world, I'd give everybody feedback. I just don't have time to do it. But then when artists kind of get to know us a little bit better, or maybe they've released with the label, then I have a different email that I'll give them. In those, I can kind of give them a little bit more, feedback and more details about why the record didn't work. And I mean, it's hard hearing no as an artist, especially when if you're an artist and you make something, whether you produce music, you're in a band, whatever it is, you put a lot of emotion in it. Mm-hmm. You sat in the studio or wherever you made the music, your bedroom, and you worked on that track for hours and hours and hours, and you put your heart and soul into it. You probably didn't sleep because of it. And then to send it out and have them say no, it hurts. I mean, it hurts. I mean, being in the music industry, you have to be okay with being told no a million times because that's going to happen. And people think, oh, once I get big, they're not going to tell me no. It's not true. You're still going to get no's all the time.
You get a bucket of demos typically in your generic box. But then as you build relationships with artists, you give them a different way to submit demos. And then you can have more of that A&R. Like people, I don't even know if people know what A&R means these days anymore, right? Like it's a lost art. It doesn't really exist anymore, but artists and repertoire, right? Developing artists. Yep. So would you say that you need to do a decent amount of like develop, if or is a track so close that you're like willing to work with them on it, or like, you know, any of that stuff?
Yeah, I think again, it really kind of depends case to case basis. Sometimes we get records where we either don't have the bandwidth to tell them, hey, we're denying it because of this. We kind of got to give them a generic, denial. But sometimes, especially with artists that, they've been sending us demos for a long time and, we really see that they want to build with us. For those kind of artists, we can usually give them a little bit more feedback and kind of dive into it. I mean, I was kind of also touching on, music is such a personal thing. There's so much emotion that goes into making music. So being told no can hurt. It definitely can hurt. But what I like to always tell people is a record label turning down your record does not mean it's bad, ever. It does not mean it's a bad song. Get it out of your head. You could be told no 55 times and then be told yes, and it could go number one on Beatport. I've turned down records that have gone silver before. Like, you know what I mean? It happens. It doesn't mean that it's a bad record. It just wasn't right for the label. So definitely a good way as an artist to make sure you're equipped to send labels the correct songs is, do your research. When you first start making music, you probably only know about the top labels. So like if you're into tech house, like Experts Only, Repopulate Mars, like Solatoco, like those labels. There are so many incredible labels out there from the top to the bottom all over the world. So do your research and don't think, oh, I'm just going to send it to these top 5 labels, because the reality is when you're first completing tracks, the chance of those top 5 labels signing your tracks, it's very, very slim. And that's okay. You'll get there eventually. But if you're only sending to those top 5 labels, top 10 labels and getting no after no, you're going to get discouraged. And that's why a lot of people quit, because they got so many no's. And it's not because they're a bad musician. It's because they didn't know all the other labels. They didn't do the proper research to put themselves in a position to get signed by somebody who's more at their level.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And then, so are there resources that you recommend artists check out? Like, is there a database of labels that you recommend for artists to check out, varying, yeah. What do you got?
Yeah. So beatstats.com is great. That's like the Beatport unofficial stat website.
Yep.
That's great. Another one that I really like is if you make a song and maybe you had a reference track or it kind of sounds like this from a big artist, go to that big artist page and look at all the labels they released on over the years. So don't just look at the last 3 labels. Look at the labels they released on 4 years ago.
Yep.
You might find smaller labels they were kind of releasing on that is a great fit for you, but it was a couple years ago. That's a good one. And then also 1001 track lists. I mean, people find records on there, but finding labels on there is incredible. Because you go to like an artist, like let's say you really like Mal P, for example. You go on there, you see all the tracks that he's playing, you can click into all of them, and you're going to discover so many amazing labels that not only can you submit demos to, but also amazing labels that release tracks that are like kind of more low key that you can start playing out. Mm-hmm. So you just got to do your research and, take the time. Like a lot of people put so much time and effort into making their music, but then they do not put the time and effort into finding the labels to pitch it out and marketing the release once it's out. Oh, yeah. And I always say, like, you could have the best record in the world, but if you're not doing those last parts, it's not going to do as good as it can do. Oh, yeah. It's like running a marathon and stopping at mile 20. You gotta finish it off and you gotta finish it up. And, it can be definitely tricky, especially as a music producer, because, there's so many hats that you have to wear as an electronic music producer, especially. You got to make the music. You got to engineer the music, mix it. Sometimes you got to master it. You have to know how to market it. You have to have the connections to send the demos. And it can be very, very daunting. But I mean, over time, as you get better and you build up your, network and your database of different people, those things become easier.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is a daily topic of conversation. It's, so many of these artists and, social media always comes into the fold within that conversation, but it's like, I just want to make music, but then it's like, I want people to hear my music. And then it's like, okay. So it's like, thinking of yourself like a business, like CEO, like you're looking after your product, which is your music. You have to think about the brand. You have to think about the marketing and components of those things. and you got to develop a thick skin the whole way through. And you gotta grind your ass off too. And I mean, when just, not to like spend this whole time talking about like your process with Repopulate and Lee and all that,
Yeah.
but like, do you have, or here's the sound we're going for, or is it more like your ears are so well trained enough where you hear a song, you're like, fuck yeah, now I pass it off, and then Lee test it? Like, is there any strategic discussions going into the future you're looking for, or any of that stuff, or is it just like when like?
Yeah, I would say it kind of depends. Especially if you look at Repopulate Mars, we've been, releasing songs for like, what is it, 8-9 years now. And what we've been releasing has changed over the years. And, all labels, they change over the years as, trends change, as what's hot changes, as the sound in general just develops. So one thing that we've always tried to do at the labels is we don't want to be a label that's releasing the same thing every single week. And that's not us
Definitely.
hating on other labels. If you're a label, release whatever you want to release, doesn't matter. But we've always been very careful not to put ourselves in a box. And because, if you're only releasing the same thing, then eventually you're going to get to the point where artists are only sending you demos of that style.
Yep.
And then you kind of get, pigeonholed into this cycle where you can't get out of it. So because of that, we've always tried to make sure that we're switching up what we're releasing, throwing curveballs. If you look at the artists we release too, we release the biggest of the biggest artists, a John Summit, a Mal P, and then we'll release an artist the very next week that has like 500 monthly listeners on Spotify. Our whole thing is this: if the record's good, it's playable, then we'll sign it.
Hell yeah.
And if it's good, playable, and if it's unique, I mean, again, a label like Repopulate Mars or any of these big labels, we get so many demos. So I've heard it all. I've heard all the Spice samples. I've heard everybody who's trying to do the thing that everybody else is trying to do. So we have so many demos that we'll get, even from reputable artists that are awesome songs.
I've done my artist management stuff, and we've sent out demos to labels. You get, you know this, like there's labels out there who want somebody who's marketable. They got buzz around them already, right? Like it's more than just the music. So it is refreshing that you guys are all about the music itself, something that'll bang, something that'll hit rock crowds, but also is unique enough. I also love that you guys are like not afraid to use, samples, and I don't even we could go down that whole rabbit hole of like clearance and all that, but you guys have put out some banger records, and I really appreciate that. So thanks for talking to us a little bit about your the behind the music with Repopulate Mars. But back to you, one of the things that I think is interesting too is like you're under management now too, and that is also a common topic, right? I hear from just even friends of mine who are DJ producers. They're like, one particular duo I was talking to not too long ago, and they're like, yeah, but we need a manager. And I'm like, why do you think so? Like what, so it is a heavily debated topic, the whole management piece. You're being managed by some people that I frankly love and I've worked with, in a few different capacities. But how did the process of becoming under management, were you seeking one? Did they seek you? What do they add to the mix for you? Like, what do they take off your plate? What's it like, that courting process? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, that's a good point. So a lot of artists, they, when they're starting to play shows and, doing bigger things, they think, oh, I need a manager. Like I need a manager. I need an agent. And I would say, generally speaking, 90% of artists who start thinking that don't actually need one yet. They're kind of jumping the gun because they think that they're going to bring something to the table that is going to change the game for them. The reality is, when you need a manager and you're at that time, a lot of times managers will come to you, and you'll know if it's a reputable manager or a reputable management company. It's probably about that time. That time comes when you are trying to elevate things, and there's so many, especially when you're touring, the different, factors like booking hotels, flights, all the different logistics. eventually it gets to a point where you can't do that all on your own. And you want to elevate the brand. You want to elevate your branding, how you're coming off, build your relationships with all these promoters and venues. And, you need management and a team when it gets to the point where you can't manage yourself and you know that they're going to bring something to the table. I'll say it's tricky because there's a lot of smaller artists out there, like as I said, who think they need management and they don't. And the unfortunate part is that there are a lot of managers out there who take advantage of that. And they'll, come to these smaller artists and manage them, but they're not really bringing anything to the table other than just kind of taking their money. So I would say just be skeptical. If management comes to you, vet them. Who else do they manage? Who have they managed? Maybe even talk to the artist. What's your experience been with them? Don't just get excited and sign with the first management company that you see. Definitely vet them out and think on it, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're being taken advantage of, and make sure you're ready for it. I mean, I've been DJing, and touring for a while now, but I waited years and years and years to get management because I knew I wasn't ready, and I knew I didn't need it. When they came to me and we had the initial discussion, it was at the point where I was like, I can't do all this on my own. I can't be negotiating my fees for like 3 different venues a weekend and doing all this. Like, it's too much. So you'll know when it's time, but just, be careful out there, because you don't want to put yourself in a position as a small artist to be taken advantage of by people out there.
All right, let's just get into some fun stuff. Like, what are some of your icks about the music industry? What do you hate that people do, or just the different components of the industry? Like, give us like your do's and don'ts as a.
Okay. Let me think. So, icks in the music industry. I would say it's a hard one. I would say that some of these labels and some of these venues and promoters, they care way too much about, is it going to be huge on TikTok? Is it going to blow up on Instagram Reels? Is it going to do this and that? Those things are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not important. Having a good social media marketing campaign, marketing it, pushing it, extremely important. But I think there's a lot of players in the industry who care too much about that, to the point where the music is set to the side. At the end of the day, the music is first. It always should be first. Whether you're making music, signing music, booking artists, the music is number one. That should be the number one, because I think that's going to bring you the best product to your label, to your venue, whatever it is. And I think there's a lot of people out there who rely too heavily on the TikTok and the this and the that, to the point where the music is just kind of like, you know what I mean? So that's definitely one of my icks, I would say. I would say another ick when it comes to like networking is, I kind of touched on this earlier, but when you're going out to shows and you're meeting artists, promoters, managers, whatever it is, you're going to get a way better result from that conversation if you're organic and you want to meet them as a person first. It's very obvious to me, because when I go out, I have people who come up to me all the time who, want to talk about this or that. It's very obvious to me when people come to me and they're clearly just want something out of me. You know what I mean? It's obvious. I can see right through them. And I think for me, even if they are talented, it just comes off as very inorganic, and it comes off as kind of like fake. So I would say, just like in general, when you go to meet people, be yourself. Don't go into every conversation like, oh, what can I get out of this guy? Like, oh, maybe the conversation will go good. They'll book me or they'll sign me. It's like, don't go into conversations like that. Go into it because you want to connect with them as a person and get to know them as a person, and kind of, go from there. And you will get way better results from that, because in general, in music and in life, people want to work with people that they're friends with, that they get along with. You don't want to work with somebody, even if they're super talented, if like they give you the ick or you don't get along as a person. So yeah, just be yourself out there. It's not everything needs to be a sell and a pitch. Sometimes you can just meet people. I've built my biggest connections at 6 a.m. in somebody's kitchen when we weren't even trying to bring something out of it, because we just became homies and we became friends, and things come out of it in a much more organic and natural way that way.
Oh yeah, we've all been at those after parties doing our best networking when our brain cells are at the fewest, for sure. So, yeah, don't party, kids. Don't do drugs. But yeah, no, that is definitely
Don't do them.
yeah, don't do them. Don't do them. Yeah, that is honestly the truth in how to go about it. I mean, the funniest, randomest, one of the stories I tell a lot was like working with somebody in the industry on a very transactional basis, and then we ran into each other at a ski mountain and we had a beer together, and we found out we were from the same, like, couple towns over growing up and had a lot in common. And then since that conversation, everything changed, so I agree, like, find that common thread, be personable, be humble, tell a good joke, I don't know, and go from there.
Yeah, be real with it.
Yeah.
Be real with it. I mean, I have so many examples of that when it comes to me releasing music, like Dylan Nathaniel, for example, or Wednesday, two of my best friends. We were friends first.
Yeah.
We connected as friends first. So when we started making music and doing shows together, it always worked out so much better because we had that friendship. We had that core there.
Definitely.
I've gotten in the studio with big producers where we didn't know each other and we didn't take a chance to get to know each other. We've made good songs, but it wasn't what it could be because there's always that kind of like friction where it's just kind of like, oh, this is just very transactional, very business here, versus where I get in the studio with somebody who I'm homies with. Even if we get distracted from time to time because we're joking around, the song will be better as a result of that.
And I think there's something to be said about, like, I think you're more willing to take risks with people that you're in it with, right? Like, you're kind of you're in the trenches with somebody, and like you're like, dude, this sounds kind of cool. Like, should we just go with it? And like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. Instead of somebody who's like rigid in their process or has a certain thing they want to achieve with their product, whatever it is, right? Like, I've been working on a track with a buddy who's like really into garage, and I had this sort of remix I was working on, just like an unofficial edit thing, and he taps in, and I'm like, should we make that second drop just go into a garage drop? And he's like, fuck it, why not? Who cares? It's our thing, So I totally vibe with that. And like, speaking of like collaborating and playing shows with people, what have been some of the most fun shows you've played? Like, any fun stories to share from your years touring?
Let's see. There's so many awesome ones. Playing the festivals have been awesome. I played EDC the last 2 years, which was awesome. Day Trip Festival. I would say some of the coolest shows for me have been in places that I never thought I would play. Like, I played in Nashville, Tennessee,
Hell yeah,
last year, which it just was like, who thought Tech House would have brought me to Nashville? And it was such an awesome show. I played in Ibiza last year, I guess. I played in Ibiza, and that was just such a cool experience. Like, just being in Spain and like plugging in the USB, like, this is insane. I started in my bedroom like so long ago.
Yeah.
So having those new kind of cool experiences that you never thought that you would get, I would say, are just like cool with these new markets and stuff. It's just awesome. Music can take you to places you never thought you'd go and meet people you would have never met. And I just think that's like so special about it.
1000%. Do you have any like dream locations, festivals, venues, anything like that?
Yeah.
Like, where you trying to get to?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of my dreams are probably like everybody's dream. I would love to play at Space in Miami.
Sure.
Obviously, anybody who's in house and techno knows that's like one of the most iconic clubs. I'd love to play in Space in Miami. Somewhere like Red Rocks would be obviously incredible.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
And then something like Coachella. I mean, I've been going to Coachella since I was like 16. So those would all be awesome. But other than that, I would say just being able to play in more countries. I mean, I've played in Canada, Mexico, the Netherlands, Spain, but I would love to play in England. We're kind of talking a little bit about some Germany bookings maybe this year, fingers crossed. So I would love to be able to kind of like, play in more other countries, because it's just mind-blowing playing in another country. It's the weirdest feeling, but it's awesome.
You're going to play Berghain in Berlin, I think. Got minimal clothing allowed. Fun.
Yeah,
fun.
I'm gonna play dubstep at Berghain.
Dude, yeah, that'll sound great. What are you most proud of as an artist right now? And then, like, what does the future look like for you?
I feel like, I've been releasing music for a while, but I feel like I'm finally just now getting in the groove where I feel like I've found my sound. And I'm extremely proud of the stuff I'm releasing, and I feel like it's very, natural and organic to who I am as a person. So I would say just still going down that path of finding my sound even further, continuing to release on great labels, but also labels I haven't released on. I have a bunch of labels that I want to, get tracks with. So continuing to do that. I definitely want to, I've been releasing music with original vocals, like a lot of original vocals. Like last year, I think the majority of my releases were with original vocals. And this year, it's probably going to be kind of the same. So continuing to work with vocalists,
Yeah.
continuing to work with vocalists that are bigger, that are smaller, and put out really original music. I want to release stuff that other people aren't releasing, and I think working at the label has given me the unique position to know what's hot, know what people are doing, so that can kind of inform me in a way where, yeah, I know what's hot and I know what people like, but also if we're getting this many demos of a certain style, I'm probably not going to make music like that, because right now, I mean, as the scene is so saturated, so you got to stand out. You got to ask yourself as an artist, what are
Yeah.
you doing that everybody else isn't doing? What makes you different than the 1 million other producers? If you can't answer that question, that's okay. Don't get down on yourself, but you got to do something to change it up. And it's not always like you have to be some musical genius who's making some pivotal new genre and it's just groundbreaking. Sometimes it's more simple than that. Sometimes maybe you have a cool series on social media. Sometimes maybe you have a little kind of gimmick you do when you DJ. You got to ask yourself, what's different about you and what's different about the music you're releasing? You got to stand out from everybody else.
That's so true. Yeah, it's so true. And even Will Clark on his podcast was talking about that. So the question then becomes, when are you breaking out the violin on? I think the world needs it.
I would love to break out the violin. I don't know if I know how to play it anymore. I could probably pick it back up. That would be sick. That would be awesome. Especially because I don't know if there are any producers or DJs who play. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are, but that would be really cool. I'd love to like kind of add some live instruments in there. Probably have to relearn how to do it for sure. But yeah, I think that would be sick. I have seen some artists who like kind of like will play guitar during their set, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, like John Summit brings out the symphony orchestra. You are the symphony orchestra. You DJ, you put on a song, then you go back into the chair, play your violin.
That'd be badass.
Yeah, that'd be super badass. So yes, uniqueness is really important. Just being yourself, all that, and just making music for yourself, I think, is something people need to remember. But you raise
100%.
great points. You raise great points there. I think that we can probably end this with, because I'm just over this technology at this point. But like all these younger kids who think that being successful in music happens overnight, and you've been at this for your whole as a DJ producer, 10 plus years, right?
10 plus years, yep.
Yeah. Like hearing you say, I'm now just starting to find my sound. I'm now just starting to get all these headline acts. I'm now bookings. I'm now starting to, really find my groove and have the collaboration stuff. And this is taking years and years and years to do. So I think that it's a positive message that, like, people aren't making it overnight. So take a breath, but work at it. It does take work. This is probably one of the most difficult industries to be successful in. And you're I think just a great example of somebody who's been doing it, has stayed humble, puts out great music, is really fun to watch live, fun to be around, honestly. Looking forward to seeing where
we've had some good
things
times,
continue
definitely.
to go for you. Yeah. Even that time in Ibiza, that was a good time. So thank you,
that was
Nick.
A very good time.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you. At the end of every episode, we'll just like pause and look at the camera and smile, and I'll take a screenshot, and hopefully this works. And if anyone hears this before tomorrow, which is Thursday the 23rd, go see Kaysin, and you're in LA or SoCal, go see Kaysin and friends at Sound Nightclub. And if you're not able to make it, or you don't hear this,
Sound Nightclub,
go see him. Just go see him at the next one. Support his music. It's dope. And hopefully we'll get the violin on some future tracks and performances.
We might.
We'll pause and look at this camera and smile. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks again, Nick. Appreciate you, and
Of course.
have fun tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Peace. This was the Racket House Podcast.